On a large farm, full of greenery, hot sun, and red earth, lived a man named Sebastio. Was an honest, hard-working farmer, with calloused hands and a broken heart. Not because he was a bad man, quite. The opposite, it was because life had taken from him the thing he loved most. His wife, Donna Teresa, who left too soon, taken by a cruel illness, leaving behind 5 small children and a husband shattered inside. The oldest, Davi, was 14 years old, serious, closed off, angry at the world. Then came Jonas, 12, too clever for his own good. Next were the twins, Bento and Nico, 9 years old, 2 little whirlwinds, in the shape of boys. And finally, the youngest, Tio Pequeno, 6 years old, who still called for his mother every night before bed. Sebastio loved these children with every piece of himself. But raising 5 boys, running the farm, fixing fences, dealing with cattle, and handling the harvested was breaking the man, and that's when he tried hiring nannies. The first one arrived on a Monday full of hope. She left on Wednesday crying, with her blouse torn because Bento and Nico had thrown sugarcane molasses on her. The second lasted 4 days until Jonas hid a lizard in her bag. The third left without even saying goodbye. The fourth sent a letter saying she would rather face a lion than return to that farm. The fifth, the sixth, the seventh, all of them left. The farm had become a topic at the city store. The women shook their heads. The men laughed with pity. "Sebastio, my brother," said Mr. Firmino, the store owner. "On a heavy hot afternoon you need someone very special. Not just anyone. You need someone who can withstand a storm without bending. Someone who truly loves children, you know, not for the salary." Simple in her clothes, cotton blouse, work pants, hair tied back without fuss. She carried a market bag and a calm smile on her face, like someone in no hurry at all. Her name was Margarita. "Good afternoon," she said, with a calm voice that seemed to cool the environment just by sounding. "Are you Mr. Firmino? They told me you know everyone around here." "I do, my dear." "What do you need?" "I'm looking for work. With children, preferably. I love children." Mr. Firmino looked at Sebastio. Sebastio looked at Margarita. Margarita looked at both of them with that serene smile. And destiny, in that hot store at the end of the afternoon, began to weave its plan. But what no one there knew, not Sebasti, or not Firmino, nor the boys back at the farm, was who Margarita really was. Daughter of an even larger farmer than Sebastio, she had inherited land, cattle, barns, and enough money to never work again in her life. But Margarita had a different kind of emptiness. She had never had children, and every time she saw a child, something inside her called out like an ancient voice. She had made a promise to herself. She would take care of children who needed it, not as charity, as a mission. When she heard about Sebastio's farm and the 5 motherless boys who drove away every nanny, she smiled to herself. "These are mine," she thought. "They don't know it yet, but they are." Agreed. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly. Neither of them knew yet how much that handshake would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Margarita arrived at the farm with a simple suitcase and a full heart. The boys were on the porch. Davy with his arms crossed, looking sideways. Jonas with a smile that promised nothing good. Bento and Nico pushing each other. And little Tayo, hidden behind his father's leg, peeking with huge eyes. "Good morning," said Margarita, with firmness and joy at the same time. "My name is Margarita. I came to take care of you." "Another one," murmured Davi, barely looking at her. "I've heard that before," she replied, without losing her smile. "And that's fine. You can test me all you want. I'll just warn you of one thing. I've worked in much worse places than this beautiful farm. You're going to have to try really hard to get me out of here." Jonas narrowed his eyes. That was different. The others arrived, trembling. This one came with her chest open. The first test came during breakfast. Bento and Nico coordinated like 2 war generals, dumped a pot of cassava flour over Margarita's head while she turned her back to get the milk. Absolute silence. In the kitchen, Sebastio closed his eyes, expecting the scream, the crying, the resignation. Margarita stood still, with flour in her hair, on her shoulder, on her blouse. Then she burst out laughing. A real laugh from the bottom of her chest, the kind that shakes your belly. "My goodness," she said, looking at the two. "Look at the size of this disaster. You two are too much. Now, help me sweep this up, because we still have to make breakfast." Bento and Nico looked at each other, completely lost. That wasn't in the script. Jonas watched everything from afar with a different look. Davy didn't say anything, but he uncrossed his arms. The days passed, and Margarita conquered the farm meter. By meter, with Bento and Nico, she invented a game. Whoever made their bed the fastest would earn the right to choose the bedtime story. In 1 week, the beds were made before 6 in the morning. With Jonas, she used cleverness against cleverness. When he tried to play a prank, she played one first funnier, more creative, and then sat with him and said, "You are brilliant, Jonas. Too brilliant to use that for small things." The boy turned red and didn't know what to say. With little Tio, it was just presents. She sat beside him, held his little hand, read stories, until he fell asleep. One night, he turned to her and asked quietly, "Are you going to leave like the others?" She felt her heart tighten, but she answered without hesitation, "No, as long as you need me, I'm here." The boy smiled and closed his eyes. That night, Margarita went out to the backyard to look at the starry sky and cried quietly, not from sadness, but from the kind of crying that only comes when something inside you finds the right place. Davy was the hardest, the most closed off, the deepest pain. He didn't yell, didn't play tricks, he just withdrew. He stayed alone in the pasture, looking at the horizon with that serious face of a boy who grew up too fast. One day, Margarita went to him. She sat beside him in the grass. She stayed silent for a long time. "You don't need to say anything," she said finally. "I just came to keep you company." Davy stayed quiet a little longer. Then he said, with a choked voice, "You know, no nanny has stayed here." "I know. Why would you stay?" She turned to him with a direct look, without beating around the bush. "Because I'm not a fake nanny, Davy. I'm a woman of my word, and a given word has no price." He looked at her for a while, then looked at the horizon again. "My mother used to say that too." It was the first time he had mentioned his mother to anyone since she had passed. Margarita said nothing. She just put her hand on his shoulder, carefully, as if caring for something fragile and precious. And Davy let her. Sebastio saw all of this from afar. He saw how she entered the kitchen, humming, and made the morning lighter. He saw how the boys laughed in a way he hadn't heard in a long time. He saw how the farm, little by little, was regaining its soul. And he saw Margarita. He saw the way she treated each child as if they were her own, the care with which she folded their clothes, the patience with which she listened to Bento and Nico's crazy stories, the tenderness with which she read to little Tio. Sebastio tried not to feel anything. He told himself it was respect, admiration, gratitude. But one night, when the farm was asleep and only the porch light was on, he found her outside, sitting in the rocking chair, sewing a torn blouse of Jonas's. "Why are you still awake?" he asked. "Why are you still awake?" she answered with a smile, without taking her eyes off the sewing. He sat in the chair beside her, and they stayed there in silence, listening to the sound of the crickets and the wind in the cornfield. Sebastian felt in that silence something he hadn't felt in years, peace, and something more, something that scared him, but that also gave him life. 6 months passed. The farm was unrecognizable, not in sizing, the laughter, in the smell of cake coming out of the oven every afternoon, in the running of Bento and Nico that now ended in hugs instead of crying, in Jonas, who had started helping Sebastio in the fields, with hat and boots, with the smile of someone who had found his place, In little Tio, who no longer called for his mother at night, not because he had forgotten, but because he had found a new lap to rest his longing. In Davi, who had started smiling again, and in Sebastian, who had fallen in love for real. That mature love, which is not a flash in the pan, is a deep ember that warms slowly and doesn't go out with the wind. But he stayed silent because she was the employee of the house, because he didn't want to seem like he was taking advantage, because he was afraid she didn't feel the same, because the boys needed her more than he did. Until Jonas, clever as always, noticed. "Dad," he said one morning, with that smile of someone who knew more than he should, like Margarita. Sebastian almost swallowed his coffee with his hat. "What is this? Boy, you do. You turn red when she walks by, and you stare at her when she's not looking." Jonas. "Dad." The five of us talked. Jonas looked his father in the eyes with adult seriousness. "We want her here. Not as a nanny, as family." Sebastian was speechless. Davi appeared at the kitchen door. "We never accepted anyone, Dad," he said with a firm voice. "You know that, but with her, it's different. She didn't come because she needed the job. She came because she wanted to, and she stayed because she truly liked us." Sebastian looked at his sons, at those faces that carried Teresa's features and his own heart, and he felt his eyes burn. "And what if she doesn't feel the same?" "Then you speak and find out," said Jonas. With all the simplicity in the world, there's nothing worse than staying silent. That afternoon, while Margarita was in the garden picking herbs for dinner, Sebastian approached her with his hat in his hand, that gesture of someone who is vulnerable, who is not protecting himself. "Margarita, I need to tell you something." "Say." He stopped. There was something different in his face. At that moment on, openness. Shihadan, desen, befare. Go ahead. Sebastian, he took a deep breath. "In these 6 months, you changed this farm. You changed my sons. You changed me." He paused, swallowed hard. "I know you are the employee here. I know it wouldn't be right on my part, but I'd rather seem foolish than stay silent." He looked her in the eyes. "I like you. For real. And it's not the farmer speaking to the nanny. It's Sebastian speaking to Margarita." She stood still for a moment, and then came the silence, a silence that lasted too long for Sebastian's heart. Then Margarita took a deep breath and spoke. "Sebastian, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before, but I was afraid it would change everything." She told him. She told him she had land, that she had cattle, barns, money in the bank, employees, that Saad and T needed that job even for a single day, that she'd come because she wanted to, because those children had called something inside her that she couldn't ignore. Sebastian looked at her, processing. And then he asked, with a calm voice but eyes full, "You spent 6 months here when you could be anywhere in the world. Taking care of 5 naughty boys. Yes. Why?" She smiled, a teary smile, the kind that carries a lot underneath. "Because wealth doesn't warm the bed, Sebastian. Because land doesn't hug you back. Because I would walk through my huge farm, full of things, and feel like the emptiest woman in the world." She looked at the house, where the boys were running and laughing inside. "And when I arrived here, on this simpler farm, with 5 boys that no one could handle, and a father broken with longing, I felt, for the first time in a long time, in the right place." Sebastian kept looking at her, and then he did what every honest man does when he has no more words. He extended his hand to her. She looked at the hand, then looked at him, and this time it wasn't a contract. Handshake was a handshake of choice. She took his hand, and the two stayed there, in the garden with the sun slowly setting on the farm's horizon, while inside, without quite knowing what was happening, the 5 boys made enough noise to fill any silence with life. Weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon with a full table and everyone together, David raised his glass of juice and looked at Margarita with that gentle seriousness that only he had. "I have something to say to you." The table fell silent. "When you arrived here, I didn't want anyone. I didn't want a nanny. I didn't want visitors. I didn't want anything that tried to occupy a space that belonged to no one else." He swallowed hard. "But you didn't try to occupy anything. You just stayed. And you kept staying. And you kept being." His voice trembled a little. "We haven't forgotten our mother. We never will. But you told us that the heart has no limit to love. That making room for more people doesn't mean taking anyone away." Margarita's eyes filled with tears. Jonas blew his nose, making an absurd noise that broke everyone's crying with laughter. Bento and Nico jumped on her at the same time, almost knocking over the chair. And little Chion Pequeno, with his mouth full of cake, said the simplest and most powerful thing of the afternoon. "I love you, Margarita." And she hugged all 5 at once, tightly, with Sabastiu watching from afar, with full eyes and a heart finally at peace. The farm was never the same again, not because it became bigger or richer, but because it gained what no money can buy: presence, care, unity, and loyalty. Sabastiu and Margarita got married in a simple ceremony under the backyard amendoera tree, with the 5 sons as godfathers, all with crooked ties and wide smiles. David became the farmer his father had always dreamed of. Jonas went to study, came back full of ideas, and was the first to modernize the land. Bento and Nico, after much chaos and much love, became the best cattle caretakers in the region, always inseparable. And Tio Piguano grew up, studied, and stayed on the farm to tell this story to his own children, because stories like this need to be told, so that no one forgets that love is not weakness, that caring is courage, that staying when everyone else has left is the most powerful act that exists. Have you ever stopped to think how many times in life we judge someone by their appearance, by their position, by what they had or didn't have? Margarita could have been anywhere. She had everything the world calls success, but she chose what the world often ignores: the love that serves without announcing itself. On Sebastian, he had the farm, he had the children, he had life organized on the outside, but he was broken inside. And it was exactly when he stopped looking for someone perfect and started seeing who was right in front of him that life changed. The boys perhaps teach us the greatest lesson. The resistance we have toward others is often not a lack of love, it is an excess of pain. When David lowered his guard, he didn't lose any of his mother's memory. He gained space in his heart for more love. And you, is there someone in your life you still haven't truly let in? Is there a guard raised that it's time to lower? Is there a word of love you still haven't said because you're waiting for the perfect moment? Don't wait. The perfect moment is now. The farm of your life needs peace, and peace doesn't come from outside it. Begins when we open the door from within. The greatest act of courage is not facing the world out there. It is opening the heart in here. If this story touched you, write here in the channel comments. I was moved if this story reached your heart. I needed to hear this today. If it came at the right time, the excerpt that touched you the most, because your reaction is what keeps this channel alive. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and share with someone who needs to hear a true love story today, because healing stories deserve to reach far.